The beautiful game isn't solely made of beautiful moments. Today, we'll be going through 10 tragic moments that had the power to destroy football careers. From promising youngsters to legendary icons of the game, these tragic moments unfortunately left a mark on their career that these stars couldn't overcome. Also, make sure you stay until the end of the video, because there will be some controversial picks that I definitely want to hear your opinion about. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Starting out at number 10 with Adriano's father passing away. If you grew up during the 2000s, you're probably familiar with Adriano. At one point, he was hailed as the next Ronaldo due to how good he was. He had the power, the pace, and the finishing prowess to be one of the best strikers in the world, but one moment destroyed everything. You see, his father was a rock-solid pillar in his life. He guided him in his tough moments, and when he passed away in 2004, Adriano fell into a deep depression. He began drinking, and despite Inter covering up for him and making up fake injuries, his habits reflected on his performances in the field, as he looked considerably heavier and lacked the finishing skill that made him famous in the first place. Unfortunately, his downfall was rather quick. Just 2 years after losing his father, he became a shadow of the player he once was. He left for São Paulo in Brazil, started hanging out with gangsters in the favelas, and never returned to his best self. Number 9. Maradona's drug suspension in 1991. In 1991, Maradona was the most acclaimed football player in the world. He had already won the World Cup with Argentina and was a talisman that led Napoli to 2 league titles. But that year, the bubble finally burst and his drug habits finally came to light after he tested positive for cocaine usage before a match against Bari, which led him to be suspended for 18 months and leaving Italy in disgrace. But although his career had been on a steady decline, he still managed to appear in the next World Cup in 1994, where he shined the first 2 games, but after another positive test, his career at the highest level was effectively over. Number 8. Mason Greenwood's allegations. A graduate of United's youth system, Greenwood was one of the most exciting youngsters of the last few years. He made history by becoming Man United's youngest ever goalscorer in European competitions and debuted with the English national team before he even turned 20. But in 2022, everything changed when photos and audios were posted online depicting several episodes of violence from Greenwood towards his girlfriend. He was promptly arrested, but his court charges were eventually dropped as the woman who accused them now appeared to want to create a family with him. It's a confusing situation that still leaves me perplexed to this date, but either way, the backlash was huge, and after months without a clue about his future, Greenwood and United finally parted ways, with Turkey and Saudi Arabia being the most likely destinations for the ones promising forward. It's almost certain they'll never play in a Western League, and his chances of returning to the national team seem about as likely as football coming home. Number 7. Loris Karius' 2018 Champions League Final. Up until 2018, Karius had been on a steady rise that everyone thought it would culminate with him being the number 1 keeper with Germany. He evolved to a top-tier player with Mainz in the Bundesliga and earned the number 1 spot in Anfield after just a season with the Reds. However, the moment that was supposed to crown him as the best goalkeeper in Europe turned out to be the death of his career. In the 2018 Champions League final, Karius made 2 amateur mistakes that costed Liverpool a trophy, and although many specialists pointed out that his errors were caused by a concussion suffered in that same match, the abuse he and the club suffered online was too much, and they were forced to part ways. Liverpool bought Alisson in the following season and have never suffered any embarrassment like that ever since, while Karius hasn't been successful in any club since that fateful day. Nowadays, he's currently Newcastle's 3rd choice keeper. Number 6. Adam Johnson's pedophilia charges. Unlike the other players in this list, Johnson wasn't really on his prime when his career-ending incident happened, but he was still in the Premier League nonetheless. A former Man City player and an England international, Johnson was playing with Sunderland when he decided to throw his entire life away. This piece of shit, who had his pregnant wife at home, initially offered the 15-year-old some signed Sunderland kits, but then the situation exacerbated to the point where he groomed her to have sex with him. Although he initially denied the accusations, Adam eventually settled and was charged with 6 years in jail. Obviously, that was the end of his career, and despite him being free since 2019, he has never found a club to play ever since. And perhaps even more shockingly, he's still with his wife to this day, who gave birth to his 2nd child in 2021. Number 5. Ronaldo's injury against Lazio. Ronaldo was the best player in the 90s, and he didn't even play during the entire decade. Nobody combined dribbling, strength, pace and finishing prowess as well as he did, and he looks set to evolve to the greatest player of all time. Sadly, that all changed after he was bombarded with arguably the worst injury that any footballer has ever suffered. In November 1999, Ronaldo ruptured a knee tendon and missed almost the entire season, but he was set to have a triumphant return in the Coppa d'Italia final. However, that dream return soon turned into a nightmare, as just 6 minutes into the game, his kneecap exploded as he was trying to do one of his famous stepovers. The faces and reactions of both Inter and Lazio players tell you all you need to know about how serious this injury really was. It left Ronaldo sidelined for 2 years, and although his career didn't end, he never managed to replicate his early form and continued to be plagued by injuries and weight problems until he retired in 2011. Number 4. Thierry Henry's handball in the 2010 World Cup playoffs. By 2009, Thierry Henry was an established veteran. He had won everything with France and had finally clinched that elusive Champions League title that he couldn't reach with Arsenal. He was respected and admired by all, so it came as a huge shock when he assisted a winning goal that would put France in the 2010 World Cup with his own hand. The referee didn't see it, Henry acted like nothing happened, and Ireland were unfairly left out of the most important competition in the world. Although he later admitted that he did hand the ball, there were no consequences for him or his country, and that completely tarnished his image. At the same time, Pedro took his spot in the Barca starting 11 and Thierry Henry was forced out of Europe to play in the MLS. Number 3. Nicolas Anelka insults his coach. If you're a young viewer, you might not be familiar with Anelka, but trust me, on his best day, this guy was one of the best strikers in the world. Nonetheless, as you can tell by the last entry, the France national team was in shambles in 2010 and Anelka was one of the biggest culprits. During a match against Mexico in the group stage, Anelka insulted his coach Raymond Domenech in the halftime team talk and was promptly sent home. That incident led to the group refusing to train for the following match against South Africa and Anelka being banned from playing for France ever again. If the coaches already had trouble trusting him due to his inconsistent form, they now had every reason to avoid him altogether. Anelka would spend only one more season with Chelsea as backup to Drogba, and then left to have a millionaire vacation in China. Number 2. Adrian Mutu positive test. In the early 2000s, Mutu was one of the most promising players in Europe, and it was no surprise when recent millionaire Chelsea decided to splurge their cash on him. In the beginning of his tenure, he was delivering good performances, and day after day, he was gaining more importance in the squad. But in the following season, Mourinho was appointed as Chelsea's boss, and the two men clashed in several instances, both accusing the other of being a liar. However, it would be Mourinho to have the last laugh, as just a few months after they both met, Mutu tested positive for cocaine usage, being banned for 7 months as a consequence. Not only was his career destroyed, but he was later forced to pay 17 million euros in damages to Chelsea. And instead of learning from his errors, he continued to make childish mistakes, such as drinking with his friends while his teammates were playing an international match, and posting an image of his manager Victor Pitusha as Mr. Bean on Facebook. And finally, at number 1, Cristiano Ronaldo's interview with Piers Morgan. During the summer of 2022, Cristiano Ronaldo was on the verge of leaving Man United. But against all odds, he ended up staying, but his relationship with Erik ten Hag eventually collapsed when CR7 was relegated to a bench player role. We all felt that his days at Old Trafford were numbered, but there was a lingering hope that a top European club would swoop in for the former Ballon d'Or winner. Then came that game-changing interview with Piers Morgan, where the Portuguese star didn't hold back, airing his grievances about the Man United structure, his coach, and even some of his teammates. And while Cristiano aimed to clear his name from the swirling rumors, it backfired spectacularly. Suddenly, top clubs were hesitant to take a chance on a player who seemed to be stirring up more controversy than actually scoring goals. He would leave for Al Nassr just a month later, and although he's still playing with his national team, that interview effectively marked the end of his time as a world-class player. And that is it for the video. Leave a like if you want to watch more content like this, and subscribe so you never miss the most interesting football discussions, news, and top 10 lists. As always, thank you for watching until the end, I appreciate you, and I will see you soon.